Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Subscribe. Please rate and review our show. I'm Blake Murphy. Will Lou is here today, but he's down at practice right now, so he'll be joining us in just a few minutes here. Will is down at practice because tomorrow on the show, we'll have a one-on-one between Will and Raptors head coach Darko Rajakovic. If you missed the news earlier today, Darko and his wife Gaga making a really cool announcement that they will be donating $20 for every assist the Raptors tally this year back to the start of the season. So the ones that already happened count. $20 for every assist. The proceeds will go to sick kids here in Toronto, St. Jude's, and a children's hospital in Belgrade, Serbia. So yeah, even more reason to track this streak the Raptors are on of 25 plus assists. Today's also the day the Raptors will visit sick kids in Variety Village in Toronto. It's kind of one of their biggest give back day of the year here with 3 days off on the schedule. So make sure you're locked in tomorrow for Will's one-on-one with Darko. He'll join us in a little bit here. A couple other small notes to start us off. Jakob Poeltl was a partial participant in practice today. He only did half-court stuff. He hasn't been cleared for contact, needs to get his conditioning up, but he's on his way back. It did sound a little like Friday's a little too optimistic, perhaps, but sometime on that upcoming 6-game road trip, for sure. The 905 played this morning. They had an 11 a.m. game at Paramount Fide Food Center. They lost 115-109. Iffy game for most of the guys. Grady Dick did have a pretty clutch three, but it didn't matter in the end. He had just kind of an okay night. Javon Freeman-Liberty with another 37-point performance. Later in the show, we'll have Marc Stein on. We got the news on the show yesterday that Adrian Griffin had been let go by the Milwaukee Bucks. Doc Rivers is now reported to be not just the favorite to become the next head coach, but he has successfully consulted himself into the head coaching job. We'll have Marc Stein on to talk about that and more 2 weeks here ahead of the NBA trade deadline. We'll also have Michael Bartlett a little bit later. He is the CEO of Canada Basketball. Canada Basketball announced yesterday that as part of their ramp up for the 2024 Paris Olympics, the senior men's team will be playing an exhibition game against Team USA in Vegas at the same time Summer League's down there. I believe there's also going to be an announcement from Canada Basketball today about some ways for fans to maybe get involved in that game. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be giving that away yet, but we'll talk to Michael Bartlett about that. The excitement already ramping up for the 2024 Olympics. The women are trying to qualify in just a couple weeks here as well, so we could maybe aim for a double podium. There is also a lot of buzz around that French team, in addition to Canada and the U.S. James Herbert, outside the NBA of CBS Sports, joins us now. I guess it's after you write a Victor Wembanyama and the future of French basketball piece. James Herbert, is that the more appropriate pronunciation now?
I'll take it.
Good. Welcome, by the way. Welcome
me
back to Toronto for a bit. So the piece you wrote, and we're mostly going to talk Raptors stuff. We've got some fun Raptors trade deadline trivia lined up. We're going to talk about Bruce Brown and guys like Bruce Brown. But you did write this big piece of CBS Sports today about, and it's called French Revolution, Victor Wembanyama, the 2024 Olympics, and the huge boom that could be coming. Tell me a little bit about that. And, you know, France has obviously been one of the world's basketball powers for a long time. But from a fan excitement, media coverage perspective, this is kind of new territory for France.
Yeah. I'll shout out another piece. I mean, I want you guys to read my piece, but also if you want to go back and read, Chris Ballard wrote a great piece in Sports Illustrated last year about Paris basketball, the team that David Kahn, the former general manager, that guy, the guy who ran the T-Wolves for a while, he is running Paris basketball. And in that piece, you see this sort of dichotomy between like the history of French basketball. They performed very well on the international stage. They produced a ton of NBA players. Actually more NBA players than any country aside from the United States and Canada.
And for a long time, they were number 2 ahead of Canada until every year now we get to do Canada broke their own record thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. There's sort of a contrast between how successful they've been in that regard and then how popular basketball is at home, both in terms of just culturally, how basketball is sort of discussed, how it's covered, and the popularity of the teams in the French league. So that was sort of in my head from that story. And my idea was to sort of write about Victor Wembanyama, walking into that context and what that looks like and what the future might be. So I talked to a bunch of people, some names that you'll be familiar with, like Nico Batum and Evan Fournier and Boris Diaw. And then some people you might not be familiar with, like George Eddy, the longtime voice of the NBA in France, who's been calling games there since like the 80s, like covered the like dream team in the 92 Olympics and all of that. And this guy like could not be more excited about Wembanyama. Like he volunteered to be the PA announcer for Nanterre's games when
Wow.
Wemby was playing there. I think he was paid, I say volunteered, but he approached them is my point. Guys like that, there are actually 4 French journalists living in San Antonio covering Wembanyama. And I talked to 2 of those guys. And yeah, there's just a whole lot of excitement there. It's kind of a complicated picture. Like his former team, Metropolitans 92, almost didn't have enough money to like compete this year. But generally speaking, there's a lot of optimism within France about the growth of that French league and particularly about the national team. And that's where the Olympics are going to be a huge deal, having Wemby be sort of the face of that team going forward.
Did you ask them if they would at all consider holding off being good until 2028 just because this is a real look? Canada's around to stay as an international power, but let's get the first Olympic medal going. We don't need the home country that already has the advantage built in, already had the qualifying advantage built in, which it turns out ended up being really, really important given the way the World Cup went, without Wemby, of course. Yeah, if they could just like hold off till 2028 in LA to be super competitive, that'd be great.
And maybe I didn't do my duty as a Canadian when I was talking to Boris Diaw. I should have just asked for a favor. Just don't bring the good players to the Olympics. But I don't think I mentioned to him that I was Canadian. I did mention to some of them. And it made some of the people I interviewed sort of hedge a little like, oh, I'm not saying we're going to be better than Canada or anything, because they remember what happened, right? They remember, they watched it.
Yeah. Also, like, I wonder if, you mentioned that it's not as big their culture. They like looking and like hearing about Shea Gilgeous and they're like, oh, another French player. That's until you hear the Alexander part, you could be sold there. The only other question I have from this, and I recommend people head over to CBS Sports and check that story out. Did you talk to David Kahn for it, or he's just becomes a figure? Okay.
Kahn. He's referenced in it. He talked a lot to Chris Ballard for that story, but I believe that story in Sports Illustrated is like the only time he's talked to like a North American outlet since he left the Wolves, probably.
Have they tried to naturalize Johnny Flynn as a French point guard the way Spain has Lorenzo Brown now?
Not that I'm aware of. But point guard's sort of a position of need for them.
Yeah, I mean, after a long time of being really set at point guard, you age out Tony Parker. Neto DeColo's still solid, but you're going to age him out. This is probably his last internet.
It is for sure his last run.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And look, we're going to spoil something, to spoil one of the non-answers, but a setup to one of the questions we're going to do in segment 2 when we do a little Raptors trade deadline trivia. Neto DeColo's restricted free agent rights are coming up in that segment. So get ready for that. We are now joined also, by the way, by William Liu, who's fresh from Raptors practice. Hasn't even taken his overcoat off. You look good, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Never seen the studio from this perspective before, but it's good to experience new things. Okay, what was I going to say? Yeah, that was a fascinating conversation. What did I walk in on? That you guys talking about France?
Yeah, so James had a big feature on Victor Wembanyama and the 2024 Olympics coming out today, and how, this is potentially going to usher in like more cultural relevance and popularity for basketball in France, in addition to them, getting back to being competitive at the highest levels. But then David Kahn is a part of the French basketball fabric now. So I was kicking around Johnny Flynn nonsense.
Got you.
How's practice, man? How's the Darko chat?
Darko was great. You will see that interview tomorrow on the Raptors show. We'll be able to play the video and then just show you the chat. But no, it was great to sit down with Darko. Darko's a really generous man, really open. And, we talked about what you expect us to talk about. Scotty, Grady, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, the next steps for them. And then we talked a little bit about Darko as well. He's been in the news. Talked about his meeting with Phil Jackson, for example.
Nice.
We'll see if the Raptors run triangle offense. I don't think so. But, anyway, yeah, it's a great chat. And I appreciate Darko for taking the time. I don't think he's seen my tweets. So the interview actually went well.
I mean, look, we found out before the starting lineup change earlier in the year that preceded the trade. We got told in no uncertain terms that, like, the coach, if not Darko himself, the coaching staff is very aware of what the criticisms from this show were early in the season.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Raptors have lost 7 of their last 8, and here we are again.
But it's training camp day.
It was
training camp day, yeah.
Okay, so one of the changes, and we'll pivot off of the James's great French basketball story, because we do want to talk some Raptors stuff current day before we get to the Raptors kind of historical trade deadline trivia in segment 2. One of the weirdest things about watching and evaluating Raptors games right now is that probably the most interesting person on the team in the short term might only be here for the short term. Bruce Brown could be gone. It's 2 weeks. It's 15 days from the trade deadline. He has, Will, here's an update on stat from the other day, 22 minutes from matching Goran Dragic's entire Raptors career in terms of minutes played already. So he'll do that Friday, presumably.
Has he surpassed Peja?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Peja only got 2 games in and like low 60s minutes. So Bruce Brown's at 68. Goran Dragic played 90 minutes. So we're getting there. So Bruce Brown is a member of the Toronto Raptors right now. James, he's someone you've written about a couple of times in the past, coming off of the championship last year. And, you wrote this piece for CBS Sports where all his teammates were kind of like, yeah, we won a championship. Bruce is out, but like, we're so happy he's getting paid. Like everyone knew the cap realities of why they couldn't keep him. You can go back to 2021, and he was a big part of a piece you wrote on positional misfits, guys who just like, I don't know how to describe this guy in the traditional 5 position dynamic. What do you like about Bruce Brown? Because he seems like a guy that's come up in your pieces and certainly your tweets and our conversations a lot over the years.
Yeah, he's a really fun player. Obviously, from a media perspective, you guys are finding out he's really fun to talk to. But even if he sucked to talk to, like he's a good player to watch. Like he kind of just like morphs his game to fit whatever is needed of him. The guy he was in Brooklyn was not the guy he was in Denver, was not exactly the guy he was in Indiana. The positional revolution piece that you're talking about came about because he was being used as like a point center, like setting screens for James Harden and sometimes Kyrie Irving, and then operating in the 4-on-3 in the short roll. And that sort of happened by accident, man. Like it basically happened because opponents would put their worst defender on him because they didn't see him as much of a threat as, say, Kevin Durant or James Harden. And then he would go up and set a screen to try to involve that guy in the action. I think the first time it happened, Trae Young was the guy who was guarding him. And they're like, let's go at Trae Young. And Trae Young would go and like try to show or blitz or whatever. And then Bruce would get the ball, and they were just scoring every time. And there was a period of time where he and James Harden were like the best pick and roll combo in the NBA, which is crazy and not something anyone would have thought when he was playing point guard in Detroit, coming off the bench, sort of struggling to establish himself as an NBA player. But he ended up kind of finding his niche that way. And then people were really shocked when he went to Denver and they just made him the backup point guard, and he did that well. And Bruce was just sort of like, well, like this has always been my game my whole life. The weird thing was when I was a center. And now I think
I'm 6'4", by the way.
Right. Like, so the attractive thing about Bruce Brown, the reason why he's coming up in trade rumors besides the nerdy cap stuff, is that he is really, really adaptable. He could help any team. He can guard multiple positions. He's always going to play hard. He's going to bring energy. He can shoot well enough, which was the knock on him earlier in his career, but I think he has answered that to a certain extent. He can make plays for you. He can play point guard, but if that's not the role, then he'll still find a way. He'll do other things. He'll go and crash the glass. He'll set good screens, and he'll just compete. So I think he's the guy that like other players, particularly stars, love having around. He's a guy that coaches love having around. And right now, the Raptors, I don't know. I guess they better enjoy it while it lasts, because I don't know how long he's gonna stay here.
So, Will, we did this. So we had Dennis Schroeder on the show yesterday, as we do every week, and Will had him pick kind of, okay, who would be the starting 5 of teammates you've played with? So he went with Shea, Tatum, Paul George, LeBron, AD as his 5.
Pretty good.
Bruce Brown's been in the league like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's like Blake Griffin, like he got the tail end of good Blake Griffin. Might not crack the lineup because you've got Harden, Kyrie, KD, Jokic, Tyrese Halliburton, Jamal Murray. Like this guy has played with real players right away. And Will, I wonder how much. It's only been 3 games, obviously, but even that first game, he told us like, hey, yeah, I had to learn how to be a cutter and a roll man in Brooklyn because who I was around. In Indiana, I got my shots in a really structured way, even though that's a really free-flowing system with Tyrese. If you're a support piece there, you know where your shots are coming from. You know where you need to be in the dynamic around that. Will, what have you seen from him in terms of how that stuff, yes, materializes in the fact that he can play 25 minutes walking off a plane onto a team, but also like a little bit of awkwardness so far that you don't know where those spots are coming necessarily on a team that this team doesn't know where the spots are coming yet.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway is like you watch the Grizzlies game, for example, and, as good as he looked in day 1 coming off and joining the team. And unfortunately, the Raptors lost to Chicago, but that was not because of Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown was awesome, and he closed the game out immediately after joining the team, basically with just walkthrough to rely on. You also saw in the Grizzlies game, it's like he doesn't really fully know his role in the team. So like there was a couple plays where he just dribbled through traffic and threw up bad shots or lost the ball. I think that's where, going to what Darko has been kind of talking about is like they need this time, right? They get 2 practices in today and then 1 tomorrow where they can kind of integrate these pieces. Bruce Brown is really adaptable, as you guys mentioned, and you can slot him in a different variety of ways. That's why one of the reasons why so many teams are going to be coveting him at the trade deadline. We'll speak to Marc Stein about that. But yeah, I mean, for this team in particular, in the here and now, like what they should do, for example, on Friday against the Clippers, like they need actual time to figure out where he's supposed to be and for his teammates to figure out what he wants to do as well. But I think it speaks to his basketball IQ that he's able to fit in so easily. And he just seems like a nice guy. Like we were having this chat in the media room, as you do when you're waiting 1 hour to be let in. Which is fine. Totally fine, by the way. But you were just chatting, and we're like, who's the best interview on the team right now? And I think Bruce, even though he hasn't really done that many interviews in Toronto just yet, he probably is the best interview on the team. Because, like, unless you want to put Garrett Temple or Thad Young in there, like, the guys that you really want to hear from that are really thoughtful and really fun to engage with, like, I feel like Bruce is number 1 in that ranking.
Well, enjoy it now because there's going to be another training camp in a couple weeks when there are more pieces gone.
Okay.
It
All
seems
right, Josh
like
Sue, we're going to request Bruce Brown as well, please.
Yeah. So look, it's gonna be fun, and what you guys have described is someone who, is gonna fit on any team, right? The on-court malleability, the fact that every coach and teammate loves him. I don't want to run the guy out of town. I would love to have a year's worth of quotes and stuff from him. Is there a spot? Sorry, you were.
No, I was gonna say like that's why it wouldn't also shock me if he stayed.
I mean, because even if you don't care that much about the on-court, the contract, like flexibility and him as a piece in the offseason is really nice too.
Exactly. Like if you don't get what you want for him before the deadline, it's not a guy that you'll be like, oh, I hate having him around for the rest of the year. You keep him and you see what the offers are. You can always trade him at draft night, you can trade him in the offseason, or like you have up until the deadline if you decide he's not going to be a part of like the next Raptor team that is going to make the playoffs eventually, right? So I don't think it's the situation where he absolutely has to go. But I do think like there'll be something of a bidding war for him now, just because like what contender could he not help a little bit?
Well,
right?
This is what I was going to ask you. And like, look, he can't get traded to the Clippers because of their cap situation, but it's going to be really funny when if the game is remotely close on Friday, when the Clippers close with like Russell Westbrook at center, basically, and the Raptors are like, yeah, here's Bruce Brown. We'll counter with that. This is now that you have no Zubats, it's the one team that the Raptors can match up with in crunch time.
Yeah, I would hope so because we don't have a matchup for Zubac. Although Jakob was moving well. I think that's the actual reporting aspect. Is just
I mentioned it off the top that no contact still, and he's got to get the conditioning up. But we'll.
He was working out aggressively, like 5 meters from the interview. Nice. So the first half of the interview, you just hear a lot of Jakob grunting as he's making floaters.
Perfect.
Another tease for the interview with Darko tomorrow.
James, to put you on the spot, if Bruce Brown were to be moved, is there a team that you like? Obviously, he fits a lot of places. Is there a team where you're like, man, that would be a lot of fun. That'd be a really good fit, other than Denver, of course, because I think we know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean that would be nice. Now like Philly would be nice. I think for him now that Philadelphia is trying to play a little bit more like Denver. Now that Joel Embiid is trying to play a little bit more like Jokic in terms of the passing, I think Bruce Brown's cutting would fit in really well there. They have a lot of really good role players already. I don't know what their strategy is exactly, but they have some contracts that they can put together. I think that is one destination at least makes sense to me, especially because the stuff that he did in Denver in terms of handling the ball when they needed it, I think that is one thing about Philly that people still have questions about, right? Even though the offense has been amazing and Embiid has been out of this world, I don't know what words to use to describe what he's doing right now. There is the question of, do they have enough playmakers on the team, especially when either Embiid or Maxey is on the bench? That's when maybe having another guy that can run a pick and roll and
it's a lot on Anthony Melton right now.
Yeah, it's a lot on Anthony Melton. And maybe you think that Bruce isn't like a huge upgrade on Melton, but even just having two of them, like that would be kind of nice.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you wouldn't have to pretend Marcus Morris can still give you playoff minutes would be a nice thing as well. Okay, so Bruce Brown, kind of the archetypal, he could fit anywhere role player. We saw another guy the other day who you think could become one of those guys, the heir to a Tony Allen / Dillon Brooks lineage in Memphis, in Vince Williams Jr. We don't have a ton of time left if we want to get to the trade deadline trivia stuff, but Vince Williams was a guy, even before that game, you were like, this guy's fun. I would love to write about this guy in the future. What stuck out to you, or what has stuck out to you about him? And are there any other guys around the league who you're like, yeah, that could be a Bruce Brown type? Not stylistically, but that kind of like any team would love to have a guy like this in their top 9.
Yeah, I think stylistically they're quite different, but just in terms of like the energy, like how hard they play, I think there are
not needing the ball. You're probably not going to be an all-star, but you're always going to drive winning. That kind of like in that spirit.
Yeah, I think in that way, Vince Williams is like pretty similar. And he's a really unselfish player. Like, and you saw in that game, he does have like some actual like stuff in his game that he's only sort of recently started to show because they've been so like decimated by injuries. Like he takes Grady Dick off the dribble at the end, kind of bullies him late in the game. But like generally speaking,
this, a Memphis Hustle Raptors 905 game?
Generally speaking, what you see is a guy who just like plays hard as hell on defense, and he's really long. He's really physical, and his shot is coming along. It's not amazing, sort of like Bruce Brown's, but like he puts in the work. You can tell the shot doesn't look bad. And then the playmaking is sort of getting there, but he became a fan favorite right away. There were people who were, some of the Memphis people I follow were like yelling about how he needed to play more earlier on in the year. And Jenkins was referencing some games he had against like guarding Luka Doncic, guarding Stephen Curry. And like, I watched some of those games and he is like pressuring them full court and he is getting up for that matchup. And like, that's the way that I think that he reminds you of the TA and Dylan and Grizzlies history. Is that these are guys that they're not just good defenders and smart defenders, and they are that, but they also like you can see it. Like they're sweating,
annoying.
They are up, they are in your face. They are really trying to bother you, and it does not seem like it would be fun to play against Vince Williams, which is why it's fun to watch Vince Williams.
Will, do you remember having players like that and young guys cutting their teeth away? I don't mean to be too facetious.
No, he would have been such a perfect Raptor from the the
bench mob era kind of guy.
Exactly, and even after that, when they were trying to get a bunch of positionless guys that are athletic and can run and jump, like he would have fit in with that for sure.
Remains perplexing to me. I think another guy who really fits this, I know he's hurt right now, but Gary Payton II, like they had him with 905 and he was that. He was playing center and shooting guard in the same games and like operating out of the dunker and then guarding all 5 positions. And they were just like, he's a little too old. He doesn't fit the timeline. And then Golden State's like, all right.
Another one of my favorites.
Yeah. Will, has anyone like this stuck out to you this year? Like, it doesn't have to be on the young end necessarily. Like my answer is obviously going to be Chris Dunn, who is even like, he's like inching to maybe going too high on that scale because just Utah needs him so much. But Will, anyone in that vein stick out to you so far this season?
I love that we're doing a Bruce Brown All-Star segment.
Yeah.
Who's the next Bruce Brown? No, because it's like, Zach Lowe does that list every year of the Luke Walton All-Stars. Like this is the Bruce Brown All-Stars. Okay, so in preparing for this list, and you told me to prepare too. I got one that's fairly well known at this point, but Aaron Nesmith, I think with the Pacers, I don't think he's as positionally diverse as like a Bruce Brown. You can't, for example, use him as small ball center as much.
Even though he's bigger than Bruce Brown, technically.
They sometimes use him to guard centers this year.
Well, that's more of Indiana's defensive issues, and they continue to have those issues, which is good for the Raptors pick, by the way. So I'm actually rooting against them now. Sorry, Pascal. But he's shooting 46% from 3 this season. Ooh. Now, I think that was the knock coming in was like, can he hit the 3 enough? Because you saw the athleticism, you saw like the will to guard and things like that. That's still there. He's a great, pesky defender. Like, they just played, for example, Phoenix. Like, he's all up in Devin Booker's, business and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that he's shooting 46% from 3 is just huge. I think he guards up, as you mentioned as well. And, he's got that competitive aggressiveness that you kind of need because it's his second chance, right? Like, he came in with Boston, didn't really make an impact, and then goes to Indiana, and he's found his role. He's found his 3. That's been fun. That's the one that's more well-known because he's played a decent amount of minutes. But to steal Louis Zatzman's whole flow, Andre Jackson Jr.
Yeah,
I love
a good one.
With the Bucks.
Nice.
Yeah, a future Bruce Brown in making, potentially even much better. But right now, just a really flexible defender, really, excellent in point of attack defense, really low usage, but a strong cutter. He's hit the 3 at a decent rate too. I mean, he's not getting a lot of shots. I think that's part of the Bruce Brown concept is like you look through his career and he's only been like 17, 18%, usage at the best. Like we're kind of looking for these like really flexible winning contributors but who don't need the ball a lot either. And I think Andre Jackson's just done a good job for Milwaukee. I could see him getting more and more minutes this season, especially if Doc Rivers wants to make this team a lot better defensively. But yeah, for a rookie, he's really come on strong, especially in a team that's like a veteran-laden team. He's finding minutes and he's finding a role.
Kind of an amazing passer too. And another rookie that I had, Cason Wallace in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like limit him to just being a role player because
But he is right now.
He is
which
right now,
fine.
and he's an incredible role player right now. To walk in day one and do this for a great team, not a good team. Like this is like the best team in the West by record at this point in the season. It's been amazing to watch. Like just from day one, he's in the dunker spot, finishing over bigger players with the softest touch ever. Just knocking down threes. He doesn't have the most gravity in the world. I think teams are learning to respect his shot because that was sort of a knock on him coming in. But he's been consistent all year long, making those shots. And even games where he's cold, he takes them like no hesitation. Like he knows what his job is. He's an incredibly smart player. I did a story on him around draft time and like just talking to his old coaches and stuff. Like that was always their thing. Like he is just extremely high basketball IQ. And I think to play on that Thunder team, you need that. And he's fit in beautifully. And I think he's like a perfect match for them. But he also makes sense in what we're talking about in terms of like he could kind of play anywhere.
Yeah. And like, look, I mean, when you have, and maybe you didn't know J-Dub was going to be this yet, but you have your three guys, right?
Yeah.
So everyone else is going to have to be, even as a number 10 pick, like Wallace was, you're going to be challenged to find your spot around those three guys. And having that kind of role malleability is really important. And you know, if that is going to be his role in the short term, he has another guy who should be on this list to learn from in Kenrich Williams, who is another of that type of guy. There is also, we're running out of time for this segment, so I guess we should just acknowledge, and this came up last week when we had Marquise Noel on the show, and he's like, oh yeah, I pick Jose Alvarado's brain all the time about like being a pesky point guard. Like half the New Orleans Pelicans, like Dyson Daniels and Herb Jones could both also be on this list.
Yeah.
So it's just like the Pelicans have been like, we'll just get them all. Give us all the pesky, annoying guys.
Also, can I bring up someone who you disparaged horribly yesterday? John Conchar. Definitely one of my favorite role players in the NBA.
Yes.
I don't know if Memphis is having a fire sale, but a good team, if they are, should go and get him.
To be clear, my criticism was not that I don't like John Conchar, who is, you know, one of those every year when we do draft stuff, and I'll run some like number filters to just like, hey, who might be underrated like statistically? This is how I really love DeAnthony Melton. Jose Alvarado was actually popped up on my list because I'm like, oh, the steal rate and the free throw rate are crazy. You don't need a lot of other skills to do that.
Just naming players who I've written about in the past couple of years is beautiful.
Yeah, we have the same Excel sheet.
This is the Blog Boy All Stars.
Yeah.
It's not even the Bruce Brown All Stars anymore. It's Blog Boy All Stars.
Yeah, it is that. Yeah. My only knock on John Conchar is that like he should not be winning. He should not be embarrassing you as an entire basketball team.
Yeah.
You know, winning entire segments. Okay, speaking of embarrassing as a basketball team, the history of the Toronto Raptors at the trade deadline, better lately, but dark in the past. Not only dark because there are some bad trades, but dark because there have been entire eras of just like meaningless swaps at the deadline. This is not that deadline, but we're going to take a break and then we're going to do, we're going to see how much you guys remember about the history of the Raptors at the trade deadline over a number of different eras. So stick with us. That's next as the Raptors show continues on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm Blake Murphy. Will Lou with us as well, back from Raptors practice, and still joined by James Herbert of CBS Sports. Jaime Herbert this time around, as we discovered during the break. All right, we should mention, by the way, one name that came up for that exercise off air is Craig Porter Jr. in Cleveland, who we all are pretty fond of as well for that type of player. The Raptors won't trade for him at the trade deadline. They have a history of trading for much less consequential players, which is how we're going to set this up. We're going to do a little Raptors trade deadline history trivia, and I'll give you guys Jeopardy style. You can kind of pick the category you want. I've got a few from each era of front office era. So there's the Isaiah Thomas era, Glenn Grunwald era, a very brief Wayne Embry era, Brian Colangelo era, Masai Ujiri era. Obviously, Masai at this point makes up like more than a third of the franchise history, but a couple dead deadlines in there where they did nothing. So, fewer questions on the early end. But James, you're the guest. I'll give you control of the board first.
Got to go old school, Isaiah.
All right. Well, this is if you've read Prehistoric by Alex Wong, you're probably refreshed on the trades that happened in that first ever Raptors season. So there are technically two possible answers to this because your definition of what the trade deadline is, like week of, if it's 2 weeks before the deadline, you know, whatever. I'll give you some flexibility here. What was the first trade deadline season move in Raptors history?
Was it getting Doug Christie?
It was getting Doug Christie. Victor Alexander and Willie Anderson to the New York Knicks for Doug Christie, Herb Williams, and cash.
That's a great trade.
Doug Christie, who I think I knew at that time as a kid as the guy who was in the dunk contest for the Knicks who didn't play.
Which is now like
He was
that
the
is now
original
a
James White
requirement to be in the dunk contest. You, in some cases, you can't even be in the NBA if you're Mac McClung. You're actually not allowed to be on an NBA roster and in there. This also brings. This is a good first choice because it brings us to something you wanted to discuss, which is, and I'm not as aware of this story as you are, but at one point, Doug Christie, after coming to Toronto, wanted out and did not get his way.
Oh, that's not the Doug Christie story. I thought you were teasing. So.
Oh, there are other Doug Christie
There are other
stories.
ones.
Sorry, keep going.
No, I mean he made a trade request that went unfulfilled for a long time. Like he was traded like years later.
For
but,
Ken
like,
Korkmaz style.
It was I mean he was better than Korkmaz even then.
Much.
But this was like after Stoudemire had asked out, and it was just sort of like it seemed like the franchise like it wasn't clear what direction they were going or whatever. And he said to the media, like he was just honest. He was like, "Yeah, I want out." And like if I remember, Grunwald just said no. Like he was just like, we're not doing that. Like he was not in like the last year of his contract or anything like that.
And you're Doug Christie, very good player,
and,
but
like,
not trade demand.
Yeah, and like he stayed and played good basketball, and people just sort of forgot about it. Like I literally was doing a story on unfulfilled trade requests, and I found that when doing research for it. And I was a Raptors fan as a child when this happened. I was like 10, 11 years old or whatever. But that had completely vanished from my memory. But yeah, that was the thing.
The other trade at that deadline, Tony Massenberg, Ed Pinckney, a second and a pick swap that didn't convey, so it became another second to Philadelphia for Sharon Wright, which if you want to talk poor process versus where you are, trading multiple picks for Sharon Wright, probably not the way you want to kick off. This is why, this isn't why Isaiah Thomas only had a couple of trade deadlines at the helm, but it didn't help.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, if you read the book, Prehistoric, I can't believe we're still doing promos for this, but like
this is the second
Why
one
not?
this week I've got in.
it was really great to just see that like things don't change that much. So one of the details in there to spoil the book so you don't have to buy it, save you money, is Isaiah Thomas and Brendan Malone did not see eye to eye. And Isaiah was very much like, look, I want to tank. I want to get even worse. I want to move to the productive players. And the coach, as always, is like, I want to win games. So one of the main contentions was like, we got to decide how many minutes do we play our undersized point guard in Damon Stoudemire in this case. And I believe, to spoil the entire thing, sorry, Alex, I know you're not listening, but the game where they beat the Bulls, which is like one of the most memorable games, if not the very most memorable games of the entire inaugural season, the beef after that game was like how many minutes David Stoudemire played. And I was reading that at that time because I got the manuscript last year, and it was during the same time where it was like Nick Nurse having to overplay Fred. Now, of course, different players, Fred and Damon, but I just thought it was really funny. And like the coach and the team at odds and stuff like that. So yeah, things don't change after 27 years or whatever it is now.
That was one of 16 games that year that Damon Stoudemire played 45 minutes or more. 16 games.
OG's going to break that record in New York these days.
Okay, so that's it for the Isaiah Thomas category. It's really only interesting the first one. Will, I'll give you the board here, even though you got it right. I'm butchering the Jeopardy rules.
That's fine.
So you can go Glenn Grunwald, you can go Wayne Embry, you can go Colangelo, or you can go Masai.
Let's go Brian Colangelo. I miss Brian Colangelo, man.
All right. In 2007, he made a small move at the trade deadline, and then at 2008, he made another small move at the trade deadline. Both of those trades involved Juan Dixon and cash.
Yes.
Who were on either end. So he trades someone for Juan Dixon, and then next year at the deadline trades Juan Dixon for someone else. Who are the players on either end?
I thought the answer was going to be Juan Dixon because, yes, I remember him joining the team. But who did the Raptors actually give up?
Or trade him for?
Was Primoz Brzić one of the options?
He was on the back end. They acquired Primoz Brzić after they were like, "Now 1 year of Juan Dixon and the NCAA video game cover is enough."
We had Primo Pasta and Sauce, and we had Primo Brzić and Sauce. So, wow, what a team that was. Who did the Raptors get rid of, though?
Former dunk contest participant.
I know who this
Fred
is,
Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
Who?
I mean, I remember getting pretty excited just because I felt like that team needed another scorer, I think. I mean, that was already like, for me, when I first came into Raptors fandom around like 2004-ish, like that team was like everything. It was so exciting watching that team. And like, I mean, they flamed out in the first round or whatever, but I was so proud of that team. And I thought Juan Dixon was going to help, and he just did not.
Nah. James, any thoughts on this one? I don't know. There's just so many one for one deals like that. It's like, man, we get so excited for the trade deadline, and then it's Primoz Brzic.
I don't know. I remember Brzic was like a pregame shoot around like all-star. Like you would watch him and he's enormous and he's just draining threes. And this is back in the time where like most 7-footers were not doing that. I was like, this guy's incredible. And you watch him play, and it's like, oh, this guy's not incredible. But
he was not. He was extremely slender for 7'2". There's a reason he was out on that.
Am I misremembering that he also wanted people to say that he was gangster or something like that?
Yes. The way I remember it is like how he in part learned English was like through hip hop culture and stuff like that, and being around basketball.
I think Rasheed Wallace, when he was in Detroit, started calling him Gangster, and then his nickname sort of became the Gangster.
Right.
Talk to Doug about it.
Talk to
Doug Smith.
Okay.
Because he would always write about like the gangster.
Nice.
The gangster.
You want to stay in Colangelo here? You want to go elsewhere?
Sure. Stick around.
All right. Speaking of things that never really mattered at all. So 2009, this is the year after that. They do a much bigger deal. Jamario Moon, Jermaine O'Neal, a first and a second to the Heat for Sean Marion, Marcus Banks, and cash. Mm-hmm. The Raptors would get back eventually the first they traded in that deal. How and who was it?
I have absolutely no idea.
I know who it was. It was JB.
How'd they get the first back?
It was the sign and trade with Chris Bosh to Miami.
There you go.
That was not trade deadline. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not trade deadline, but
back.
It's related because it's the first they gave up at the deadline.
That's what I'm trying to do with Jakob.
Yeah. You're trying to get your pick back.
Please, I have the receipt. I have the receipt. I know it's past the 30 days.
So the first round pick they gave up in that trade was they got it back at the Chris Bosh sign trade. It became Jonas Valanciunas. Also that deadline, sub question here. They traded a second round pick that never conveyed for a very irrelevant Irish-sounding big man who was not Irish.
Bryant.
There you go.
Bryant.
There you go.
Wow.
POB.
Yeah. POB.
What was Colangelo cooking with some of these moves? Because I feel like, sometimes if you're a bad chess player, like you can only see like one or two moves ahead.
Yeah.
Like he's just like, oh, I'm in a castle and then I'm going to get my rook out there and then maybe like check him one time. Like it's not like a grand like
I can see the king. Get him.
Yeah, it's very much exactly like that. So I think the Jermaine O'Neal trade was like, let's clear up cap room so that we have, because I think Sean Marion's contract was expiring 1 year earlier, and then we have cap room and then go get Hito Turkoglu. And it's like, dude, like what are we doing here? Like we gotta have a long-term strategy, not just anyway.
Okay, this next question is a team one. You guys are gonna do it together.
All right, let's do it.
So 2011, we're fast forwarding a couple years here, still in the Colangelo era. The Raptors trade a first round pick that would eventually become Norris Cole to the Chicago Bulls for James Johnson. James Johnson is one of 10 players to have 2 stints with the Raptors.
Oh, wow.
Can you guys name the other 9?
James, you're going to
They
have
had
to
to have actually
2 stints with the Raptors. They had to have actually
Two
played in a
separate
game
stints,
for
wow.
Like, did Antonio Davis play in a game when
He
he came
did.
in? He did? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There's one.
Why am I blanking on this?
2
man?
technically because you've got James Johnson. One of them Will just made a joke about.
Jakob, obviously. Yeah, he's still on the team.
Tracy Murray.
Tracy Murray did,
Yes. Yeah.
Man, I feel
2
like
very well liked, like 10-day/end of season guys that eventually came back.
Rafer Alston.
Rafer Alston.
Pop Spencer Bonsu?
Pop Spencer.
Wow, that's a
Ooh,
complete
nice.
guess, man. Wow. Okay.
So you've got 4 more.
Naming some legends here.
I know.
Yeah,
man.
4
I love
more.
Pops, by the
One of
way.
them you should get because Colangelo era draft pick who's still kicking around the league.
Colangelo era
boy.
draft pick still kicking around the league.
2 stints with the Raptors.
Who did
This should
Colangelo
be-
draft?
This should be obvious to us.
Second round pick didn't work out.
Oh, PJ Tucker.
PJ
Yeah,
Tucker.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I forgot that he was drafted here.
That's an obvious. That was like the most obvious one on the list. We didn't get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jakob. I mean, Jakob's literally on.
Oh, yeah.
I
Well,
literally
second
just saw
most-
Jakob.
yes. Okay.
there are
Again.
3 left.
Yeah.
Um,
Man. Give us like a year or like an era.
I mean, we are in the Colangelo
This is all Colangelo era?
They're not. The answers aren't all Colangelo era, but one of these players is. He had a little stop in Indiana in between.
yeah.
I'm struggling.
A center,
A center.
big white dude.
Jeff Foster? He
No.
didn't play twice.
Nope.
Who were the white centers that came to Toronto?
I mean, Greg Foster, not Jeff Foster. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
But neither Foster
I
is
know,
the correct
but,
answer.
I mean, Yeah.
White dude who played.
Hansbrough. I mean, he only played one.
Hansbrough was only one.
Okay, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
For the sake of the segment. Rashon Nesterovic.
Oh, yep. Oh, my
Just 2
God.
stints?
That
Yeah.
one's pretty easy. That one.
Yeah, he's played 2 years here. Went to Indy for a year. Played one more year here.
Oh my
The
goodness.
other two on the list are Maceo Bastion and Oliver Miller.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't
Maceo
have bet those.
Bastion.
Yeah.
When did Oliver Miller
great-
come back?
He came back at some. Oh, he left. So he was here in 95, 96. Got
Yeah.
traded to Dallas. Came back the very next year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He came back weighing the 4.5.
Yeah.
0.
Because Dallas cut him. And yeah. Anyway,
Very
so
talented player, though.
not the sexiest
Amazing
of.
passer.
Yeah, seriously.
Apparently, Derek Brandeo, our board up, had Oliver Miller. And he was all over
This
it.
man was just upstairs screaming Oliver Miller. Oliver Miller.
He was all over it.
Better man than us.
Yeah.
Wow. Derek,
Okay.
I didn't know your game. I'm sorry. I actually didn't.
All right. Where do you guys? Oh, so okay, we'll scrap that. That
wasn't
one's
really
too hard.
familiar
There's one
with
that's
your
way
game.
too hard in here.
Okay.
The Raptors traded some future second round pick that eventually, years and years later, ended up on their summer league team in 2019, but he didn't actually play because he got hurt. It was
the guy who didn't play in the summer league team. No.
yeah. The pick that became Jamal Franklin is in here somewhere.
Ain't no
and
way,
then like
man.
5 years later, they're okay. So let's go to we've got
buddy,
the
isn't it?
Glenn Grunwald era, we've got the Wayne Embry era, and we've got the Masai era. Where do you guys want to go next? I don't care who picks.
You're the guest.
Messiah. I don't know.
All right.
Let's do it.
So Masai's first 3 trade deadlines, he made only one move.
Oh, yeah.
What was it?
Austin Day for Nando DeColo.
There it is.
Okay.
Aforementioned. First year, I remember, yeah.
The sub question here, though,
Oh,
in the Ujiri era. So that happened in 2014, that trade.
yeah.
Nando DeColo finishes out the year.
Uh-huh.
They held on to his rights in restricted free agency for
buddy.
almost 9 years. What trade required them to finally renounce the rights to Nando DeColo because they needed the cap space?
I remember you being very excited about this specifically, but
I was very upset.
yes, but you know what I mean. It has to be recent, like the last 2 off seasons.
Yeah. It does have to be recent.
Um,
Wow. This is basically, do you read Blake Murphy's tweets? And the answer is no, definitively.
I do, but I can't like the amount of times this man has tweeted about Nando
I wasn't
DeColo.
really familiar with your game.
Was it this past offseason or the offseason?
Yeah, give us a
before?
timeline.
It was
on
last
this.
year's trade deadline. It was the
Last
Jakob
year's trade deadline.
Oh, it was the Jakob.
Why do we
yeah.
put him in there?
Pardon?
Why?
They needed to create cap space to operate as a cap space team for part of the trade.
Okay. All right.
Little cap nonsense. But it's part
Yeah,
if you've
yeah.
ever wondered why I never shut up about how I didn't like the value in the Jakob Poeltl deal,
Oh,
the
this is
real
why?
reason is because
This
the
is why?
rights to Nando DeColo.
I've seen Bobby Webster tease you about this in real life. So.
Yeah. Okay. So sub question on the Jakob trade from last year. They gave up a first that is top 6 protected this year, a 2025 second round pick, and a second round pick that conveyed this past year. Who did the Spurs select with it?
Oh, City Sissoko?
There you go.
Wow.
City Sissoko.
Yeah. I'm surprised he dropped to the second round, but then again, I feel like offensively he doesn't have much to offer right now. So, yeah. But
All right,
I remember
French
seeing
basketball content.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah.
Okay. So in 2021, the Raptors made 3 trade deadline trades.
Yeah.
They traded Norman Powell for Rodney Hood and Gary Trent Jr.
Yep.
They also traded Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis separately for second round picks. Who did those second round picks become?
Delano and David Johnson at 46 and 47, I believe.
There you go.
Yeah. 45 Express.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame the picks weren't 45 and 46.
I would have been great if it was 45. They took the Martin Grove instead of the Kipling.
Jeez.
Sorry, that's like literally where I grew up. So that's why
Okay.
Delano's so close to me.
We're going to use this as a pivot to the Glenn Grunwald era part of the board. So that's the Gary Trent Jr. trade. In what trade did the Raptors acquire Gary Trent Sr.?
Ooh.
Oh.
Was it the Damon Stoudemire trade?
It was the Damon Stoudemire trade in 1998. Damon Stoudemire, Walt Williams, and Carlos Rogers for Kenny Anderson, Gary Trent Sr., 2 firsts, a second, and one of our colleagues,
Alvin?
Alvin Williams.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, actually Gary actually came on the show as he does pretty much annually. Basically, Gary Trent Sr. will come in with the mink, and he remember teasing Alvin a little bit.
Yeah.
Coming through together, and I think there was a story told where like somebody got injured, like warming up against each other or something, involving Alvin. I don't know. This is like 20 years.
Alvin's just being a dog. He's trying to make it on the Bruce Brown All Stars.
Alvin would have been a Bruce Brown All-Star back in the day,
For
honestly.
sure.
Okay, here's
Yeah.
a depressing one. So the two
These
first
aren't depressing enough. Damn,
Yeah,
I
this
thought you
is-
were
no,
going
it
to be like
gets
JV4
worse, man.
Norm or JV4 Mark that
It gets
completed the
worse.
championship. Okay.
So they, as part of that deal, they picked up 2 first-round picks. They would turn around and trade both of those picks along with Roy Rogers for who?
Like right then at the same.
Shortly after, not immediately. Not something a team that just sold Damon Stoudemire should be turning around and trading 2 first-round picks for a guy bordering on his 50s. If that's a hint for you.
It was 50s.
Yeah. So
He was at one point by far the oldest player in the NBA.
It wasn't Alvin Robertson because he's already been gone. Oh, John Long?
Kevin Willis.
Oh, yeah, okay.
2 firsts for Kevin Willis when you're just traded your future of the franchise.
I'm grateful I wasn't a fan at that time.
Yeah, you were just a little baby.
Yeah,
I
I wasn't thinking.
I was
2 firsts would
unbothered.
not have been required to get John Long.
Okay. Here is a bizarre one from the Glenn Grunwald era. Bear with me because this is going to take a bit to explain. So in 2001, they traded away Muggsy Bogues and Mark Jackson to the Knicks for Chris Childs, a first, and then they traded Tyrone Corbin, Corin David, and Corliss Williamson, and a first to Detroit for Eric Montross and Jerome Williams. So a lot going on in here. The first they would eventually trade as well in the Kareem Rush, Chris Jeffries trade. They picked up a second in that deal, though. And it is the second that has stuck with me for a long time because it's the second with which they passed on Carl English to select Ramon Vandehaer. Ramon Vandehaer, the other first in that deal, by the way, became Fran Vasquez, the draft rights to Fran Vasquez. The same.
I love that podcast. Sorry.
The same team currently still holds the rights to Ramon Vandehaer 2003 and Fran Vasquez 2005. What team holds the rights?
Nah, man.
This is an
just tell us.
insane person question.
There's no way not either of us know this. Man. Spurs.
Chicago.
Let's just say Spurs or something.
The Orlando Magic still have Fran Vasquez's rights, and at some point picked up Ramon Vandehaer's rights.
Obviously, Orlando had Fran Vasquez's
Yo,
rights.
you're a
I figured
sicko for this one, man.
They must have moved them at some point, but I guess not.
If they moved them, they got them back. Quickly, we've only got about 2 minutes left in the segment. There is a Wayne Embry era on the board.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
So Wayne Embry bridged between Rob Babcock and Brian Colangelo. He handled the deadline in 2006 and made 2 deals. Do you remember what they were? So this is after the Vince Carter trade has already happened. At the deadline that year, they made 2 smaller deals.
One of them was the Antonio Davis, Jalen Rose one, right?
Yes, they attached a first to get out of Jalen Rose's money. That first became Ronaldo Bachman, and they took Antonio Davis back in it. The other one was very pointless.
That's all I got.
Dude, I mean, I was a fan at that time, but I don't remember that at all. I knew the Jalen Rose part, but
nice piece of work here. They got 2 seconds for Aaron Williams.
Oh, nice. I did enjoy for a stretch there that the Raptors had 3 Williams on the team. Like 3 out of 15 players were all named Williams, and it was a bit absurd, to be honest.
I mean, they're on their way with Porters now. They just got
they just got to get Craig Porter Jr. and then we're good. We assembled the Porter All Stars, I suppose.
Can't believe I threw the Jamal Franklin thing in here. What a stupid thing to include.
Wow, I mean, there are other good trade deadline moves, like the year we got Serge and PJ was fun.
All right,
Mark was fun.
Rapid fire here because we've only got like a minute left. Who did the Raptors give up in 2013 for Sebastian Telfair?
What?
For Telfair?
Yeah, they got Sebastian Telfair.
Yeah,
2013.
I know
Who
that.
did they give up?
Dude, that's such an obscure thing.
Never played for the team.
No, this was like.
They had picked him up in the Rudy Gay trade.
Who else did they pick up in a Rudy Gay trade? No, this is killing me, man. No.
Hamad Haddadi.
He was a Raptor?
Wow.
Yeah, he was acquired as part of the Rudy Gay trade, and then they were like, "We'll find a new home for you." They attached a second round pick to him that became Lamar Patterson for Sebastian Telfair. Man, what great memories of Raptors trade deadlines past. Let's hope. I don't know, this year's version of Austin Day, Fernando DiColo, who's someone with restricted free agent rights we can go after here.
Yeah, this one's gonna be very difficult to do. But James Herbert, appreciate you. James Herbert, we've come on and done another game. No more drafts today, at least.
We can still do another draft down the road.
Okay, you know what? After Bruce Brown gets traded, maybe we'll call you for a Bruce Brown type of draft.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be the most obscure radio that we do on the show. But appreciate you. And we're gonna take this break. Been your host, Will. You've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Will Lou. Blake Murphy, co-host, holding it down, hour 1. And big thanks to James Herbert. of CBS Sports, for joining us for segment 3. We have Marc Stein on the line once again. Mark, exciting day in the NBA yesterday. A coach at 30-13 for the Milwaukee Bucks gets dismissed, Adrian Griffin. He has been sent packing. There was some confusion, at least overnight, in terms of, was Doc Rivers officially going to take over and whatever, but seems to be become official now. But, I wanted to ask you at first, what was the issue and sort of what were the circumstances that led to the Bucks deciding to make this dramatic move and letting go of Adrian Griffin, who they had just hired in an extensive coaching search process this past summer?
Well, let's be honest. There's been issues since Halloween. I mean, that's where I think, there's been no shortage of rumblings of discontent going back before Halloween when Terry Stotts, one of the most respected names in NBA coaching, abruptly leaves the staff. That was kind of the first signal that things were amiss. And it's, yes, the record is 30-13, which it's the best in-season record for a coach for a team that's made a coaching change midstream since what we saw happen with Cleveland and David Blatt almost 8 years ago exactly. But I think it's been nonstop rocky with the Bucks pretty much from the jump. And my sense is, I think you guys have been following along, because I know you guys read me closely, which I greatly appreciate. Chris Haynes and I on our last podcast, we talked a lot about how the Bucks, even though they're shy on trade assets, have really been trying to find a way into the DeJounte Murray mix. And even if that's unrealistic, the Bucks are trying to make something happen trade-wise because things were not going well. And I think they just came to the conclusion that for all the shock this is going to cause, as seemingly unusual as it would be to make a coaching change this quickly with Doc Rivers available to be hired, that's the biggest change that they can make on the fly. That's probably the most impactful. And, it's the old cliche. It's just easier to change the coach than change the players. And I think that does factor in here as well. They could go out, there's no, another one of those maxims that we always throw out. There's no free agency and there's no salary cap in coaching. So they're now going to be paying 3 coaches, but they felt like Doc Rivers was there and they had to go get him.
So, Mark, you mentioned that this has been brewing since Halloween, which is a really amusing phrasing to me because it makes it feel like something weird happened at the Halloween party and like it just no one could recover from it.
Spooky season.
But this has been, like you said, this is like game 4 of the season. The Bucks were in town. The Raptors, they just hammered them. And this is obviously not a very good Raptors team and wasn't at the time yet. And from that moment and talking to people around the Bucks, there was confusion about, what was the defensive scheme? Why was that the defensive scheme? Where were people getting their shots? So this seemed like it wasn't going to work very early on. How big an indictment is this on the coaching process, the coaching search process that they went through? Because I know that, things changed. You didn't think you were going to be able to get Damian Lillard necessarily when you made the Adrian Griffin hire. But even if you thought you were looking at a bit wider of a window here and you could take the lumps of a rookie head coach, you still have Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, at that point, Drew Holiday. You are firmly in a win now mode. So I can't imagine that much of what was being asked of Adrian Griffin changed after that trade. How big a problem is it for the Bucks that they botched this one after moving away from a coach? And I know they got Giannis to sign the extension, so maybe that makes it all worthwhile. But it really does seem like they put a lot into this coaching search. It took them a long time to move off of Budenholzer, and they botched it.
Yeah, no question. But like you just said, even so, they have gotten Giannis to sign the contract extension. So that's where another popular topic is, was the Damian Lillard trade the right move? These guys maybe aren't meshing as well as anticipated. They lost Drew Holiday in the process. But if that trade ultimately leads to Giannis signing a contract extension, and if this botched process, if they can rebound from it now and they have a top-level coach in place, yes, they got there very clunkily, but there is a pathway now to potentially turn this thing around. But look, I think the most important aspect of this whole story, and I wrote about it at length on my Substack yesterday. I hope you guys checked it out. What I was told, we've heard for months, we've heard since May that Adrian Griffin was the preferred choice of Giannis Antetokounmpo. But as the Bucks continued to struggle, more recently that was described to me as more that he did not want to play for Nick Nurse. And there was sentiment within the Bucks organization that Nurse should be the next coach. And when you see what's going on in Philadelphia with the impact that Nick has had on the Sixers and Joel Embiid specifically, that's really where I think the microscope is going. That's where the microscope would have lingered if the Bucks couldn't turn around now and bring in Doc Rivers. But I don't think that story and that question is going to go away because the Bucks really did have the ability. I think they had the chance to hire Nick before Philadelphia did. And you have to wonder how much they regret that.
Do we have a sense of why maybe Giannis wasn't as enamored with that? Obviously Nick left Toronto with certain criticisms of him, but the playoff and the tactical side of things was pretty unimpeachable here and looks that way in Philadelphia. Do we have a sense of why that wasn't a fit in Giannis's estimation?
I still have to do more reporting there to nail that down, but I feel, obviously you guys saw what I reported yesterday, and that's as far as I can take it at this point. But that has been stressed to me that was really the crux of it, that for whatever reason, Giannis decided to champion Griffin because that was the direction he wanted Milwaukee to go rather than hire Nick Nurse. And again, is that a mistake that the franchise cannot recover from? Not necessarily, because again, as messy as it's been and as much of an eyesore as this whole thing is going to be, because it does look terrible that you fire Adrian Griffin with a record of 30-13, the second best record we've seen of a coach to lose his job in season in league history. It looks terrible. So they're going to have to answer the questions for it. But if this thing all turns around and if the Bucks are headed in a better direction come playoff time, people will get over it rather quickly. But Doc Rivers also can't change the roster. The fundamental defensive issues that the Bucks have post Drew Holiday are still there. And it'll be a huge challenge for him to address that.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting too because you're hiring him straight from him doing a lot of media. In this case, calling some Bucks games, talking about the Bucks on various programs. So you actually get a really good sense of what he would want to do or, what the ceiling of this Bucks team is. For example, he was just on, he'd been doing recurring hits on Bill Simmons' show, and you get a real sense of what he wants to do in Milwaukee.
Yeah, you say things like, hey, this team could use like a real Doc Rivers type at the helm.
No, but it sounds salacious, you know what I mean, when you mention it like that, because, of course, it's been revealed in the course of this, dismissal and also the hiring of Doc that, he was advising the Bucks in part in this process. Mark, was there something really salacious going on? Because I think people are very easily connecting the dots here about Doc kind of like engineering a way to get to Milwaukee.
I'm going to say no, and the reason is, I feel like I know Doc pretty well, and obviously I think I have a fairly decent handle on the way things work at ESPN, and I don't, by all accounts, and everyone I've talked to, I think Doc was really enjoying the broadcasting life, and I don't know that he was in a huge rush to come back now. And, my sense is the Bucks, I'm sure they've made it worth his while financially. Let's not kid ourselves. We know that NBA coaching money can be fantastic, especially at the top end of it. But I don't think there was any question that Doc Rivers was going to coach again. But my sense is he really did. He was enjoying this life with, calling games and a lot of golf. I mean, he, obviously the way things ended in Philadelphia were rough. And, he endured a lot of criticism for the Sixers' playoff shortcomings. So, to me, there's the larger question, and, I don't know that everybody want to get involved in a journalism one-on-one class. Why network, and I would say the same thing about TNT whenever someone there is, like, if you're on the media side, don't work with an NBA team. Don't be an advisor for an NBA team when you're working for a broadcast network. That shouldn't happen. that to me is the part that I would question. But I don't feel like this was Doc Rivers, working desperately behind the scenes to get this job.
Which is, that's a little better, certainly. It's the optics are what they are. But I guess the other big question here, Mark, is why Doc Rivers? And we know that they had enough trust in him to be a consultant earlier than this part in the process. We obviously know Doc has a very long resume, a lot of respect around the league. But the criticisms of Doc have also been similar criticisms to why the Bucks moved on from Mike Budenholzer in terms of the playoff inflexibility or kind of hitting the cap of that second round, with the one exception of the Celtics back in the day. Now, maybe that's been unfair for Doc to carry around because it's a shared thing. There's also the matter of this part of the season. There are only so many coaches available. But why, in your read of this, did they think Doc is the right person to get the most out of the Giannis and Dame pairing to right the ship here and get a very good Bucks team from very good regular season team back to championship contender?
Because Adrian Griffin, fair or not to him, I think as a first-time coach, struggled for player buy-in from the beginning. And Doc Rivers is going to get player buy-in from the beginning. And I still believe that is the – look, no, let me rephrase that. The most important thing about when you're an NBA coach is your talent. That is the most important thing. But the second most important thing is player buy-in. And to me, I'm sorry, X's and O's and tactics and, supposed basketball acumen is a distant third. So, first of all, Doc Rivers knows, he knows what he's doing. And he has to take the criticism. The playoff loss, the Game 7 losses are there. The playoff losses are there, and that's criticism he has to absorb. There's no getting around it. But player buy-in is one of the hardest things to achieve as a coach, and he will get that. He will get these guys on the same page, and they've been all over the place, even with that 30-13 record. And so, to me, it's clear why. There's no available coach who could walk into that room and immediately have the buy-in of pretty much everyone. And I have no doubt that Doc Rivers will establish that very quickly.
Okay. Well, since we're on the subject of Milwaukee, you had also mentioned in your previous column before last night's breaking news that the Bucks are also trying to get their way into the DeJounte Murray sweepstakes. And the other options there are the Lakers, for example. But yeah, tell us about the Bucks' interest in Murray, and how does that even work for them? How do they even get a deal like that done?
I don't want to take credit for that because it all comes from my podcast partner Chris Haynes. He's the one who reported it last Friday. To me, the headlines from it just shows how much pressure the Bucks are already feeling, even after making the Lillard trade, even after Giannis agreeing to a 3-year contract extension. The Bucks are looking at every roster improving option they can find halfway through the season. And so to me, that really was the headline. It just tells you the desperation that this franchise is already feeling with a record that, 25 other teams would love to have. And then very swiftly after that emerges, that they would love to get into the mix for DeJounte Murray, they make a coaching change, which I think just slams home the desperation even more. The reality is the Bucks have very limited trade assets. So if Atlanta is holding firm, if Atlanta really wants 2 firsts for DeJounte Murray, I don't see how the Bucks can manufacture 2 firsts, but John Horst is pretty good, so let's see what he can come up with. They're gonna do something.
So when it comes,
I don't think the coaching change is the only move we're going to see from the Bucks between now and the trade deadline.
When it comes to the DeJounte Murray market, and if that's what's out there that the Hawks want 2 firsts and they're not moving off of that, do you think we learned more about that market from the Heat? Kind of, I guess, pulling out of that to the extent that they were ever in it and trading a single lottery protected first along with Kyle Lowry's contract for Terry Rozier this week. Like, those are obviously, there aren't going to be that many starting caliber point guards on the market. Did you tie a line between the Rozier trade and what Murray's market could or might look like?
I just think that's such a good move for Miami to you do something in the short term. You give this season's team a boost, and you don't really impact your ability to go out and, and I've written about their interest in Donovan Mitchell. I mean, I think everybody knows that whether it's Donovan Mitchell in the future or some other, Donovan Mitchell, underline this, Donovan Mitchell is not available right now. There is no, quote, star-level player in play for Miami or the Knicks or anyone else right now, by all accounts, at this point as we speak, at whatever time it is on January 24th. So I like the move for Miami because they've upgraded in the short term, and it shouldn't affect their ability to go after that next star whenever that next star becomes available. So really like it for the Heat. I just don't know if the Hawks can get two firsts for DeJounte Murray right now. I mean, the Lakers, I reported the other day, the Lakers to this point have had the most substantive conversations with Atlanta on Murray. But look, we know the Lakers do not want Austin Reeves anywhere near that trade. He's off limits in any kind of Murray scenario. So the Lakers really only have one first to work with, and the Hawks, by all accounts, don't want D'Angelo Russell, so the Lakers would need a third team to make such a deal work. I don't know if that's possible, even as well as D'Angelo Russell is suddenly playing. So, but look, we got 2 weeks and change, so I mean things can certainly change.
Yeah, no doubt. But that one's interesting because D'Angelo Russell is hooping right now. But I think it says something too that the Lakers want to get that upgrade done because the Lakers have also been linked to, for example, Zach LaVine, and as you described in your recent piece, like it's hard creating any sort of a market for a player who is still quality, is still in his 20s. Like he's 28 years old. It's not like he's the oldest guy or anything like that. But it's just hard to move a player with that much money left on their deal. And I think from the Toronto side, because this is obviously a Raptors show, like I do wonder, is that part of the reason why the Raptors were reticent to retain Pascal? Because a lot of thinking from us here was like, well, if he doesn't want to leave, maybe you sign him to an extension and then you have more team control to trade him on if you trade him down the line. But it seems like it's pretty hard to trade even a 28-year-old all-star like Zach LaVine because of the money left on his deal.
Yeah, and when we're talking potential landing spots where the team already has two max guys, it becomes even tougher.
Right.
The reason why Indiana had such an advantage in the sweepstakes for Siakam is because they only have one max guy, and they know that in free agency they're not really a destination, so they get to make this move, get Pascal's bird rights now. Now they can re-sign him at a high number without having to renounce anyone. I mean, for the Pacers, it was there were so many positives, but there were very few. There are very few teams. Most teams already have a twosome that they're paying a lot, and so that's why I've never bought the Lakers as a LaVine destination, even though he would help them immensely in terms of what they're lacking offensively. But do you want a $215 million third option? Do you want to? There are. Kyle Lowry, everyone thinks is going to get bought out. I think there's a list of 7 teams right now that can't even sign Kyle Lowry if he hits the buyout market because they're a first or second apron team. And so this buyout market is when people are really going to start to see the impact of the new CBA landscape. When, these power teams that were so used to dominating the buyout market, they're not going to be able to bid for a Kyle Lowry or theoretically Gordon Hayward if he becomes available via buyout. And I think that it's really going to start to sink in then, this new landscape that we live in.
Is that something that could potentially make, say, a Bruce Brown more valuable? I know that, there's still $22 million. You still got to make that cap math work, but a shorter deal, the flexibility of having a team option on the back end of that, something that you could either decline for the flexibility or pick up, and that is maneuverable again in the future, again, to make everything about the Toronto Raptors. What sense do you get of?
It was very smart of Toronto to get Bruce Brown for that exact reason, because people, when the trade with Siakam went down, half of the discussion is, did the Raptors get enough for Siakam? We might have to judge that differently after we see what they can get for Bruce Brown.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's gonna be the question we're gonna be asking everybody. Who can we get for Bruce Brown? Who can get for Gary Trent? Dennis Schroeder, if there's a market there, Chris Boucher, because the Raptors have officially moved in that direction where, it's not like everybody they got to move, but, I'm sure they'll be making calls, and these are smaller type of salaries. They can be involved in 3-team trades, and I expect their phones to be busy because the Raptors have officially moved in that seller mode, and we will see how that goes for the team. Mark, I appreciate you. We've taken a lot of your time, appreciate you joining us on the show once again.
Be good, gents. Talk next week.
Marc Stein.
Yeah. Substack. Mark's
dude, he's got lots of great stuff in there.
Like indispensable all the time, but especially this time of year. Like we're talking daily trade deadline update stuff, and then also, by the way, Doc Rivers is replacing Adrian Griffin.
No, I mean it's funny because from a media perspective, us telling people to get to Marc Stein's stuff, it's like us being like, yo, who was a problem back in the day? Tracy McGrady was a problem. He was a bucket. It's like, yeah, everyone knows that. You know what I mean? Like, Mark's been an industry standard for a long time. So I appreciate him joining us. You can get more of the details there on all those transactions. And yeah, I mean, do you expect Toronto to be at least maybe not directly 1-for-1 outside of Bruce, but can they move some pieces around just to sort of be part of 3-team trades potentially? Or
yeah, I think so. And this is look, this is part of the complication of now having 5 players on your roster who can't be aggregated together. So any of the guys and what I mean by that is you can trade Bruce Brown, but you can't take his $22 million, add it to Jordan Wara's $3 million, add it to RJ's contract or whatever, and multiply that in trade the way the trade rules work. But you could trade them all individually. You could trade them in multi-team deals. Multi-team deals also allow you the flexibility to so this is a weird wrinkle of the CBA, but if you and I make a trade, we don't have to structure that the same way if it benefits us to do it differently. So for example, in the Indiana trade, the Raptors actually took Jordan Nwora into the Precious Achiuwa trade exception in a separate thing so that they could create a larger trade exception with the Pascal Bruce Brown trade part of the deal. So there's a lot of wiggle room for stuff like that. And you can really get your way into deals when you have a lot of the mid-tier salaries, Bruce Brown's 22, Chris Boucher's a little under 12, Dennis Schroeder's a little over 12, even someone like Thad and Otto who make 8 and 6 respectively.
Gary's expiring at 18.
You aren't going to get a ton of assets back for being a facilitator in a multi-team trade, but it really does help you. It does just give you opportunity. It's also worth noting that the net product of these trades is that the Raptors have about $9 million in wiggle room beneath the luxury tax line. So if they need to help out in one of these trades and say, hey, Bruce Brown's going somewhere and a team would really like to get off a $30 million contract for that $22 million contract because they need to get out of the tax. Kyra Lewis's inclusion in the Pelicans-Pacers-Raptors trade was so the Pelicans could get out of the tax. And they paid the Pacers a second-round pick to take Kyra Lewis, and then they turned around and made Kyra Lewis part of the trade. The Pacers got a free second out of the cap machinations there. When you're $9 million under the luxury tax and you have a bunch of these salaries that could be potential filler, it's not going to be the sexiest trade. But if you can pick up a decent second, something like that, like a player that you get a look at ahead, another guy to throw in the rotation, get a look at ahead of RFA, who knows, maybe even something as small as hey, it lets you throw Jalen McDaniels in a trade and that $4.5 million for next year that I think you'd probably like a reset on, you're free of it. Little things like that aren't good headline items, but when you look at what the 2024 start of offseason outlook is going to look like, they will make a difference.
Yeah, and I think, this is the super high end of something that you mentioned like that, but didn't Masai back in the day, he just jumped into that Dwight Howard trade and he got Andre Iguodala out of it, flipping Aaron Aflalo to Orlando.
Yeah.
And this is different.
I used to be jealous of throwing Aaron Aflalo in a trade to pick up an asset.
I am jealous because if you get Andre Iguodala in this kind of contest, because he was actually great for the Nuggets.
And look, I know people get tired of the Raptors, or us trying to explain, and it's not saying we agree with the moves, but you do as part of this job, try to put yourself in their shoes and try to figure out what they're thinking. And a lot of it over the last couple of years has been flexibility. And, the clock was running out on the flexibility of trade or re-sign Pascal, trade or re-sign OG, but the flexibility of You've got a pretty clean cap sheet. You could be a cap space player. You could also turn around and rent that cap space out. Like that was part of how the Thunder built up the asset chest that they have. Is like we just always have cap space, and if you need to unload Davis Bertans,
Derek Favors, get over here,
yeah, and like give us picks for it,
right.
Because and so part of what Mark's talking about is this new CBA environment where not only is the luxury tax as you get into the second apron are more and more, they cost you more and more in actual dollars. They're also going to start costing you more and more in terms of what moves you're allowed to make to continue to build your roster.
Yeah.
Like the Clippers are not going to be able to do anything next year in terms of building the roster. So teams will eventually need to, like, especially in the 1 to 2 years here where everyone figures out the new dynamic and what that looks like, there might be a window here where like having cap flexibility, having some of these movable contracts, even if it's an unsexy trade that doesn't really do anything for you, right? Like it's not making your 2K team better. It's not it's not even necessarily making what you can do this summer better, but it sets you up in a better asset position for the longer term, for the 2 to 3 year window you're looking at here. All that stuff's possible. Now, it's not going to keep anyone warm at night, but it's better to have that stuff than not.
Flexibility doesn't keep you warm at night?
No.
I mean, the only thing is, aside from the flexibility and collecting extra assets, I would, if at all possible, like to see the Raptors bring some more bigs into the developmental pipeline. It's really unfortunate what happened with Christian Koloko. It's been reported now what happened to him. But, that was a guy that I thought that the Raptors could at least try to move forward with, putting aside the medical condition. And so I think, you see it right now with Jakob getting injured. It's like the drop-off is tremendous, right? And Jonte only joined the team recently. Get some more bigs into the program so that the drop-off isn't as steep. And, of course, long-term wise, you can have other pieces. And who knows? It doesn't have to be addressed at the trade deadline. You can also do it in free agency. Maybe throw a bag at Nick Claxton, for example, see how that goes. But, yeah,
they
just
came up at the deadline.
That's a little humble request. Just get some more bigs. Because, I know we complain about Vision 6'9", but damn, we got Vision 6'3" right now.
Yeah.
With a lot of closing lineups outside of Scotty. Yeah.
I'm tired of looking at people almost eye to eye. You get back to me not being able to look at anyone except for Fred.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take this last break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. When we come back, let's talk about Canada basketball. Welcome back to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Lou, joined by co-host Blake Murphy. And for the final segment today, as promised before the break, let's talk some Canada basketball with Michael Bartlett, CEO of Canada Basketball.
This isn't a ski hill? What? I was told you were in Geneva. This is what's going on? It's not even an après ski environment.
Yeah, definitely no après ski today. A long day of FIBA meetings. I need an après ski after that, actually.
In seriousness, so you are in Geneva for these FIBA meetings. To the extent that you can tell us, like, what are these like? What's going on at these? I'd imagine it's peak Olympic setup time now, but how do these meetings go?
Yeah, I put my hand up to join a competition, like the competitions commission, coming out of the World Cup last year. So, we've got myself on the women's national team competitions commission. Catherine Plouffe is now on the 3x3 competitions commission. We have to, as we continue to rise in the global basketball rankings, we got to make sure that we're at tables so that our voices are heard. We're shaping some formats for what future tournaments look like, the way that decisions are going to be made, qualification points. Even one of the big topics that we've got in the women's national team commission, our women's team played in the bronze medal game of their World Cup. They played 8 games in 10 days. Our men's team played in the bronze medal game of their World Cup. They played in 8 games in 17 days. So, we have to get better as a global basketball community in making sure that the women have more recovery time. So I'm being pretty loud on that this week.
So we want to talk about yesterday's announcement with the men's team in the lead up for the Paris Olympics. But while we're on the topic of the women's team, for anyone who doesn't know, February 8th to 11th, that team is in Hungary, a pool of 4 that also includes Japan and Spain. The top 3 will qualify for the Olympics. Where is the program at right now in terms of confidence level in that group punching their ticket in February and their chances of, for the first time in a really long time, us having 2 5-on-5 teams on that Olympic stage?
Yeah, you bet. Confidence is not a Canada basketball problem these days. I promise you that. We are quite confident. The women are well prepared. We had a mini camp a week and a half ago with our North American-based players, many of those WNBA players that aren't over in Europe right now. That crew will slide over to Vienna middle of next week. we'll all regroup for another week of training before that competition takes place. So we've got Hungary, the host country, on the 8th, Spain on the 9th, top ranked team in the world, well, number 4 actually. And then we take on Japan. So we've effectively got to win one of those 3 games. We'd like to win all 3 and make a statement for the global basketball community and punch our ticket.
Yeah. Well, flipping over to the announcement made yesterday.
Yeah.
Canada versus USA. It's finally happening, and this time not for bronze, although that was great if we can get a repeat of that.
Right.
July 10th in Vegas at Summer League. It's going to be on Sportsnet. Take us through the details of this and how this sort of came together, because I'm going to want to be in Vegas for this for sure.
Yeah, you bet. We're excited about it. How did it come together? Well, I think it's important as our program in the USA start to develop a rivalry that we create and curate opportunities in North America and to play against each other. We knew that USAB would be training down in Vegas, that they would be looking to host one game in North America. USAB works very aggressively. They've got games that they will announce over the course of the next few weeks that they're hosting, all across the world leading into the Paris Olympics, and we knew that we had to get into one of those. So it was actually shortly after the bronze medal game that Jim Tooley, the USAB president, and I said, the best way to keep this rivalry fire going is to make sure that we get down to Vegas, play them once before we all disperse and get the rest of our prep games in. Also, I think important for both of our programs, we want to play each other early. There won't be a lot of trade secrets shared across the court that day. We're playing each other early enough. You'll probably see some pretty immature systems go against each other on purpose. Because the ultimate goal is then we match up together for a medal game, perhaps even a gold medal game down the road in Paris.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Almost turned out with the friendlies you guys had done with Germany heading into the World Cup. A couple of them, we almost got the rubber match there for gold. So as part of this as well, I don't think a tweet has gone out yet, but it's up on the Canada basketball website, basketball.ca. So I'm going to ask you about it. I feel like it's fair game. You guys, along with one of your primary sponsor, Flair Airlines, are also doing like a fan trip from Toronto and from Vancouver down to Vegas for this. So the details are up on basketball.ca. Some people, if you're like me and like Will, you might not want to do the specific dates because you want to get a little summer league while you're down in there as well. This does take place at the same time as NBA Summer League. But what can fans do to kind of go down and be a part of this for Canada basketball as Canada basketball fans?
Yeah, this is fun for us to be able to do, and we've never done something like this before. So with an airline partner like Flair, and certainly with Nav in our corner and the super fan mentality, you travel to go see your team play. And because this is going to be a rare opportunity to play USAB in North America and curate a whole experience around it, we saw the opportunity to put a fan trip together. So yeah, certainly visit basketball.ca, register for more information. We'll have the sales program up and running in the course of the next few days. The tickets and flight packages really affordable considering what it normally costs to go down to Vegas anyway. And true, perhaps you want to extend and this package isn't for you and you take some time down in Summer League, but the Canada Basketball Superfan is going to have a unique opportunity to go down on a plane filled with people that have the same passion for basketball in this country and see what this team can be this summer.
And to be clear, I'm not saying don't do this trip. I'm saying just like arrange a different flight back after so you can get some Summer League into. The Raptors now have like infinity picks in this draft. You can check the ball out at Summer League. So on the court, there is obviously going to be the fan side of this is cool. The relationship with USA Basketball is cool as well. How much coming out of the success you guys had in the World Cup when you were evaluating what worked versus what hadn't worked in previous years or what you would have liked to do better, the fact that you guys did get so many tune-up games in against peak competition, kind of, doing the time zone difference a little bit at a time in Germany and in Spain, was that a pretty big takeaway for you guys for big events moving forward, that was really valuable, even if it means asking the players for a longer window of time, even if it means a little bit more travel and things like that for the program? That was a really important part of the success?
Yeah, I think it was, Blake. In fact, I think the players now consider it a non-negotiable.
Okay.
The one thing about the top quality pro players we have in our men's and women's system is they want to win. And, these professional athletes know that high quality tune-up games is the best way to prepare. We've heard it time and time again, the clip of AI saying practice. We're talking about practice. At the end of the day, they'd prefer to play games. So that is an investment that Canada basketball hasn't always been able to make. for one reason or another. And we really committed ourselves to making those investments as we led into the World Cup, both the men's and women's. And that we'll be making those investments for those teams heading into this Olympic game. So, yes, the USAB game has been officially announced. We've got some other exciting announcements for both our men's and women's programs as we work our way towards Paris, who will be playing, and it's all top quality, top 10 competition to make sure that we're ready.
Hey, Michael, you mentioned the words non-negotiable, and I think that the women's program has always been really strong, and I don't think there's been as much discussion there. But on the men's side, there's been so much talk about how they've established this. I mean you guys, how much you guys have established this culture of, going back 3 years, 4 years ago now, of just like really getting that commitment, getting this group, and sort of seeing that through. And of course, the World Cup was such a big coming out moment where it's like finally we basically reached the potential there. Maybe even just a little bit short, obviously, of the gold medal match, but. Yeah, talk to me about how that culture and how that commitment was built on the men's team in particular, and how that's gotten you guys to this position right now.
Well, it starts with bold vision.
Okay.
I think certainly coming out of the loss in Victoria, program leadership, namely Nick Nurse at the time, Glenn Grunwald, we're prepared to ask our players and our staff and our board, from a financial perspective, and our business to make some bold changes. And one of those bold changes was recognizing that dropping an all-star team in the middle of a competition is not always the best way to achieve the result that you want. In fact, the Redeem Team documentary is the case study of that, how USA got into a bit of an all-star, pulled the team together format and realized now we need some continuity and consistency. And maybe that played out a little bit this summer for them too, not having a team and dropping an all-star team. But we've had a group for the last 3 years. So that bold vision, bold investments, and then quite frankly, allowing the players to have a voice. And I remember the moment I was in the room, fairly new employee at the time, 6 months in, when program leadership was talking to the players about what would be expected in order to be bold and to achieve our ultimate objectives, in our opinion. The strategies that we were going to follow. And when your best player in the room, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is the first one to stand up and say, I'm in, that's a bold response. And that bold response is played out every summer with our best athletes on the team being the first ones on court and the first ones in camp and the hardest workers. And that sets the culture. You can have as bold a vision as you want. It comes down to whether your best lean in and actually take the bold vision as their own and live it through the way that they're activating in the program. And Shai, RJ, Dylan, you name it, they're all doing that. Kelly, Dwight, they leaned in and made it their own. So as we head into the summer, and the women have been doing this for decades, the program culture has been really shaped by their attitudes and their behavior, and that's the ultimate team atmosphere.
Do you have a sense yet? Look, that's awesome. I got so excited when you said Shai stands up first. Like, oh, I'm in.
I got chills.
I'm in. Yeah, exactly. And when you mentioned Dwight and Kelly, and my head immediately goes to the scene in the locker room after the bronze medal game, and them being so emotional. It's very, very cool. Do you have a sense yet? So this game's July 10th. The Olympics start July 27th. Do you have a sense yet of what the commitment ask is going to be for this summer for players who do want to come out and play? I'd imagine there'll be a little bit of a camp before the USA game. Are we talking about a 6-week window start to end again?
Yeah, probably. We're looking to convene. I think the NBA and FIBA regulations allow NBA players to convene with their national teams as early as June 28th or 29th. So we're not going to miss that mark by much, if at all. And we'll prep into a training camp, Canadian based. So good news is, and not to announce it yet, but we will be doing training camp events in Canada for both the men's and the women. So there'll be opportunities for fan engagement there. And then rolling down to the US and the women rolling over, to a bit of a European tour before, heading into Paris. So for both programs, there's probably 6 weeks The women's might not be straight. We might actually, because we've got some flexibility in their availability, we might do windows, a break, window, a break, and then they get into their European leg. But ultimately, our coaches, our program leadership, our sports scientists are putting together a program that is designed to allow these athletes to peak in time for the competition. And it takes money, it takes energy, it takes resourcing, and it takes time, and it takes their commitment and time. And I heard Rowan on the Fan yesterday talking about how gracious the players are with their time, because ultimately they see the opportunity that we got this summer. And I think for the next number of Olympic cycles, I've said it 100 times, but the next where were you when moment in Canadian sport will be a Canada basketball moment. And it's because these athletes are giving themselves to this country this way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it was in Asia last year with the World Cup, but, I still remember where I was when Canada made the comeback against Spain and finally clinched it. And I was so excited to recap that game. And, of course, the USA game was incredible. The win against Slovenia and Luka Doncic was incredible, So lots of great moments, and, of course, a lot more to come as well. And, I think my only other question with this is just, with the head coaching position, we did see with Nick, it was community because he was in Toronto. But unfortunately he got let go in Toronto and he had to abdicate the spot. You guys were able to get Jordy in. I guess my concern now is what happens if Jordy gets gets a full-time NBA head coaching job. Is there any concern that we might lose Jordy as well? Because I've grown quite fond of Jordy, as I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, you and me both. I drove down to Detroit first week of January, actually, to see the Kings play the Pistons and catch up with Jordy and Jay Triano. We had a nice meal.
Yeah.
No, there's ultimately no concerns. Jordy is as Spanadian as they come now, as we've said. He's part Spanish, part Canadian. He is so locked and loaded into what we're building here, already talking, about what this could be long-term for the country. We're certainly with him and Victor Wembanyama, who Spanish and coaches our women's team. We're learning a lot from the Spanish system around youth development as well. And they're both starting to get their hands into what it looks like downstreaming into our entire cycle, how we how we train coaches, how we, create even more connectivity in our player environment. So they're having a transformational impact, both of them. And they're locked and loaded for their time commitment to Canada basketball. Listen, he gets a head coaching job. Nobody will be happier than us, but he's been quite clear and, in saying that this is a priority for him.
Yeah. No, seriously, he was awesome. I mean, especially to hop in on short notice, get the buy-in of the team, and lots of great moments. I think one of the coolest things about watching the FIBA competitions, you get to see coaches' cuddles and timeouts. Sometimes you get to see the exact play that's coming out, I'm like, oh, am I seeing too much? But
it's crazy.
Even just getting to see the way he's able to interact and command the presence of the group, that was awesome to see from afar. I'm sure you see from up close. I want to ask on your end too. I think there's so much talk over the years about Canada basketball. Are they well funded? Is it like, is there enough resources to get this done? Is there enough backing and financially? And it sounds like, the program has certainly taken this, corner and really rounded and brought in more resources so that, basketball in Canada, both on the men's and the women's side, can be as competitive as any program in the world, just financially. Take me through your part in that and sort of the importance of, the unseen portion, the improvements of the financials on that end to make it all happen.
I think we're getting there. Are we there yet? No. We're still not as, financially fluid as I think we would all like to be. There are still some investments we'd like to make in our program that, are kind of priority 5, priority 6. So they're off the list for now. But, and a lot of that is really how we are now attacking coaching development and age group development and making sure that we sustain program excellence for 2, 3, 4 decades. And those investments have to happen today. But ultimately, listen, what we stand for as an organization and as a sport for this country, I think is what a lot of brands corporately are trusting. We recognize that basketball is, the fastest, if not one of the top 2 or 3 fastest growing sports in the country. We recognize that, the diversity and mosaic of Canada is represented in the game every time you watch it, whether it be in a community gym or in one of our teams. And, we are also an organization that is performing 9 of 10 9 of our last 10 tournaments, 5-on-5 tournaments, we've been in the semifinals. So we're an organization you can count. Yeah, that's a stat that I don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
We're competing for a medal almost every time that we play now. And you know what? That gets attention in this country. And over time, maybe that'll even get boring and it'll just be something that they expect. And we'll have to have a summit in 10 years when we don't win a medal because the people will think the walls are crashing in. I'd love that. I'd love it to be that expected of us. But ultimately, what's happening is that brands are coming forward and saying, you know, this is a sport, an organization, and a performance narrative that we want to be a part of. Donors, you know, individual philanthropists are coming forward and saying the same thing because we're offering unique opportunities to be a part of building something that you can be proud of. The coolest thing about what we have is that the national flag is associated with it, and the players are Canadian for a lifetime. We've had to watch, you know, as fans of the Raptors. I'm a former MLC employee and a Raptor fan, and it's tough to see players traded. Mm-hmm. A eureka moment in my, you know, head a few weeks ago is like, a Team Canada player will never be traded. So Shea on Team Canada for as long as he wants to be on Team Canada. Kia, Natalie, Michelle Plouffe, they're Canadian for life. And I think a lot of organizations, corporate organizations, and fans in general are starting to find the real magic in that and leaning into what we mean for this country.
There you go.
Yeah. Other than Ignas Brazdeikis, he went back to Lithuania.
You didn't trade him though. He chose. You can choose.
I know. We are out of time. Otherwise, we were obviously going to do the roster reveal for 2024 Olympic team. You were going to give it away. Who's going to play on it?
Yeah. Is Wiggins going to play? Is Jamal going to play? Yeah, revealed right now. No, of course not.
But we're out of time. You get back to the ski hills, Michael. Thanks so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Michael Bartlett, CEO of Canada Basketball. Again, it's July 10th, Canada against the U.S. in Vegas, which will be a lot of fun. I'm sure you'll be down there for Summer League anyway. You can catch that action. Fans can go down there. I will be, I don't know, the Jays against the Cleveland Guardians or something that day. I don't know what the Jays schedule is for July, but there's no way I'll be there for it. So
I know you'll have one of the TVs on the studio with that game on in the background if they do conflict.
Of course. It's I'm trying to look up now who the Jays are. They're in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So,
by the way,
I could just commute San Fran to Vegas.
Yeah, no problem. Honestly, it's like an hour flight. Yeah. It's called the Andy Lou Express. Real quickly, though, I can't believe we didn't mention this. Scotty Barnes was named to the USA 41-man select roster, and that's no guarantee that he's going to make the final roster, but it's great to see him in the program because I know in the last couple cycles, like, you didn't see Scotty as much.
Yeah, and Darko was asked about this, so we'll see if he ends up being a part of the team or even the camp, right?
No, but even being in that environment is awesome.
Yeah,
Darko is well-deserved.
Yeah, so this is a quote from Darko from practice today. He said, I think being surrounded by the best players of the national team gives you different perspective. Sometimes young players, they think they have the answers for many things, but once they're surrounded by vets and you see how they're operating, how they're working, when you see Steph Curry, the way he's working, Kevin Durant, the way he's working, how every rep is so important, how they're taking care of their bodies off the court, it just goes a long way and sets you for long-term success. And I think that, this is me now, not Darko, I think that there's a pretty good example in that locker room now in RJ Barrett of how playing a role in the national team, even if it's not the starring role. Now, it was when RJ led Canada U19 gold, and it was at that point the biggest moment on the men's side that we've had in a really long time.
That was awesome. He cooked Kevin Herter.
I watched that upset game. Like Brady Heslip at Summer League, like came over and was like looking on my computer and stuff.
Wow.
So that was the moment that we had before this World Cup and now before the Olympics, at least on the men's side. So yeah, I think a good example in RJ for Scotty Barnes to look at of how. That, I mean, and he knows he played the U18s, the U19s on the U.S. side as well.
Well, I mean, look, Scotty, this is also prime tampering season. You know what I mean? So selfishly for the Raptors, I'm like,
let's aim higher than Josh Christopher for who's coming in as a Scotty pal in a couple of years.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so it's exciting, but I also think it's a huge recognition for him to get to that spot. It's well deserved. So, okay, that's it for us today. I've been your host, Willie. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. Thanks once again to Blake Murphy, Mark Boffel, Daniele Franceschi, our board producer, Derek Brandale, Jennifer Rolick, David Says, Jared Manatad. Thanks to our guests today, Marc Stein, James Herbert, and Michael Bartlett. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.